In most people's minds, anarchy summons up visions of a lawless hellscape where only the strongest and most brutal people can survive. Something like The Purge. In fact, the second Purge movie literally has the subtitle, Anarchy. But I don't want that. It's obvious that in a world where only the strong survive, I'd be burned for fuel on day one. How could I want something so incongruous with my effete soft boy lifestyle?
Any soft boy lifestyles aside, we are off to a good start. This guy does realize that anarchy doesn't necessarily imply chaos.
What I want is socialism.
God dang it, dude, we're off to a good start.
What I want is socialism, but like, without a state?
Which is completely possible, although difficult. Well, depending on how you define socialism, it is a rather broad concept. For example, people point to stuff like charity as an example of voluntary socialism.
Also, it'd be mad decentralized.
I hate to break it to you, Thought Slime, but socialism tends to centralize naturally, just because of the nature of the concept. If everything has to be owned and operated on a collective basis, well, those types of policies have a tendency to centralize.
We call this framework anarcho-communism.
The key idea behind anarcho-socialism or anarcho-communism is that voluntary communes should exist for people who prefer that arrangement. The problem is, Thought Slime, you seem to want to force your way of doing things onto those who would prefer capitalism.
Hey, real quick, here's the definition of socialism I use, so we can be on the same page. Common ownership of the means of production, which is to say that the stuff needed to make the stuff needed to survive, so like factories, tools, and farms and that kind of thing, are owned and controlled by everyone that depends on them, rather than privately owned by whatever ding-dong had the money to buy them.
Well, here's a problem with your definition, Thought Slime. Anything can really be a means of production. This is because of the simple fact that if something can provide utility to one person, it can provide utility to multiple people. Or to put it another way, something that may not be a means of production for an average everyday person may be a means of production for someone in a particular industry. For example, we don't consider kitchen utensils to be a means of production, although a chef would. We don't consider musical instruments to be a means of production, although a band who performs concerts would. Hopefully, if my Patreon takes off, my computer and microphone will be a means of production.
Sounds pretty good, right? But if you ask centrists and right-wing goofballs about it, oh, it works on paper, but it'll never work in real life.
Well, there are many challenges that come with implementing socialism. In addition to the one I just mentioned, the definition of means of production, there's also the transformation problem, the motivation problem, the management problem, and that's just the practical side of it. There's also the morality of who gets to decide what resource distribution is the fairest.
There's just one little thought-terminating cliche that prevents socialism from ever working in the real world. Attila the Hun, Elizabeth Bathory, Mozart, Andy Dick, Marie Curie, Camus, Tilda Swinton, Napoleon, Octomom, Nelson Mandela, Sonic the Hedgehog. All human, all possessing the same mercurial essence, the unseen, irreducible, inalienable quality of human nature that makes their actions and behaviors exactly the same if you think about it.
Mr. Strawman, give me a break.
Well, first of all, it is possible to believe that people have a general propensity to behave a certain way without believing that all human behavior is uniform. Second of all, the argument that's actually being made is that all actions are fundamentally self-motivated. Now, that doesn't mean all actions are motivated by selfishness, but even actions that are generous or altruistic are performed because the person performing them believed that this was a worthwhile course of action. They did so because they, in particular, formulated that this would be a worthwhile result to achieve.
Socialism can't work because people are simultaneously too greedy and too lazy. That may seem like an oxymoron, but it isn't because...
Well, it's not an oxymoron. If you're lazy, it's very much possible that you expect other people to do all your work for you. Thus, your laziness is also a form of greed, because you expect time and labor from other people.
Well, anyway, that's a pretty dim view of humanity. If you ask me, I happen to think that mutual aid is a factor of evolution.
I also believe that mutual aid is a factor of evolution. That's why I think people will do the right thing absent coercion. It's usually people on the left who advocate for stuff like wealth redistribution taken from people by force because they believe that people are too greedy and selfish to do the right thing and help the poor.
The assumption Wieners make is that socialism is somehow based on everyone sharing stuff with no protections in place if somebody tries to take all this stuff, because it's all based on the honor system, I guess. All the stuff is just put in a big pile, and people can come and take whatever they want. So one person could take everything, and everyone else would be hosed.
Well, isn't one of the key concepts behind socialism the idea that people are entitled stuff because they need it, not necessarily because they earned it?
But socialism doesn't just mean everybody sharing things. It means that if everyone in a community needs something, nobody gets to own it privately. And as a consequence of that, people kind of have to share things.
Well, here's the problem with that thought, Slime. You claim to be an anarchist, right? After all, you said in the beginning of the video, you want socialism, but without the state. Since you don't think there should be any form of government, who's enforcing this? Who is it that makes sure people aren't hoarding property for themselves? Who is it that arbitrates claims as far as what is it that is or isn't a means of production that's needed by everybody?
Let's look at a very realistic example I've cooked up with my good anarchist brain. Say we have some rich pervert, let's call him Dave the Capitalist. Because of his inherent rational self-interest, he covets material wealth.
Naturally, Thought Slime wants to portray this as a bad thing, but because Dave covets material wealth, he's now incentivized to make other people happy in order to obtain that wealth.
In his village, the greatest producer of this wealth is a big fidget spinner factory. All the rest of the people in his village need those fidget spinners to soothe their nervous energy. Under capitalism, Dave gets to buy the factory, assuming he has the capital to do so.
And how is it do you think Dave obtained the capital to do this? More likely than not, he worked hard to earn it. Perhaps he started out working in someone else's fidget spinner factory before being able to buy his own.
Then he owns the fidget spinners, and everybody has to pay him to get one. And since they have no other way to self-soothe, he can charge whatever he wants.
Except he can't, because there's going to be other companies out there also making fidget spinners trying to compete for your business. And if they can sell the same quality fidget spinners but at a lower price, they're going to get that business instead.
That's called inelastic demand.
Demand for a particular commodity is said to be inelastic if a purchaser is unable to put off purchasing it if they can't afford it. Examples of things that have inelastic demand would be like healthcare and housing. I'm pretty sure you can put off paying for your fidget spinners.
He can bilk the poor fidgety peasants for everything they have and live high off the hog on his fidget throne.
Or these poor fidgety peasants could start their own factory to compete with Dave's, try and see if they can offer their fidget spinners at a lower cost. And if they can, then that puts pressure on Dave to lower his prices. And since you claim to be an anarchist, well then there shouldn't be any red tape or regulations to get in the way of them doing this.
Under socialism, Dave doesn't get to keep the factory if everyone else needs it. Sucks for Dave, right?
Well, actually it does, because now all that capital he worked hard to earn and that business he worked hard to build is all just taken from him. All that hard work just gone. Which is funny, because, commies usually make a big deal about the value of labor. People are taking advantage of labor that Dave performed by taking that business he built. Dave is being exploited.
How's he going to feed his capitalist family? Oh wait, it's fine, because all of the things necessary for survival, like farms and shelter, are owned in common. So he has just as much right to food as anyone else, presuming that he shares in the labor of producing it.
Wait, so Dave is only entitled stuff insofar as he works to earn it? That sounds like capitalism to me.
But how would the peasants take away the factory? They just walk in and take it, because the police and military wouldn't back up Dave's property claims, because property claims wouldn't exist.
So if property claims don't exist, on what basis are the populace repossessing this factory then?
And ideally, neither would the police or military.
So what, you think Dave's just going to invest all that money in something he's going to leave completely unsecure? Just because the police and military don't exist doesn't mean a privatized equivalent wouldn't. I have a feeling what would actually happen is the people invading the factory would be told to piss off, and if they continued to invade the factory, well, they'd be Swiss cheesed with an AK.
Socialism doesn't break down if people refuse to share, because you can't hoard things from people if nobody respects or critically defends with force your right to privately own things if other people need them to survive.
So before you were saying you believe that a lot of criticisms of socialism are in error because they assume a uniform human behavior. Now you're admitting that your system would require just that. And like I've mentioned before, a person who can afford to invest in a factory probably also has money to invest in security for that factory.
Human greed isn't a big problem for socialism, because the economic system doesn't incentivize it or protect it?
Yeah, it does. Under your system, I'd be able to just take shit from people on the grounds that I need it, even if the other person worked hard to earn it.
But it's a big problem for capitalism, though.
Capitalism actually does a pretty good job at managing greed, and that's because the only way to obtain something is to earn it through hard work, or to provide something that someone else needs. You can't just take shit from people like under your system.
Oh, oops, 1% of the global population owns 50% of the total wealth on the planet.
And it's the countries that implement this shit you think is so wonderful that's largely responsible for this wealth divide.
A lot of the jobs people do now would be completely irrelevant in an ANCOM society. We wouldn't need anyone to work in advertising.
How would people know about this wonderful system of yours then? How would you recruit participants?
Or finance.
Well, I'm assuming your system has no currency involved. I'd imagine there would need to be resource management on some level.
We wouldn't need managers, middle managers, presidents, vice presidents, executives, account managers, brand specialists, thought leaders.
Wait, so your system doesn't have any management involved whatsoever? So these factory workers are just kind of supposed to decide for themselves what to do? Yeah, I'm sure those will be some high quality fidget spinners you're turning out there.
Lobbyists, or any of the other parasites that capitalism makes essential nowadays.
Well, those last two are mostly necessitated by the state and have very little, if anything, to do with capitalism. I'm as critical of lobbyists and cops as you are.
A lot of jobs just straight up don't need to be done at all. David Graeber writes about what he calls bullshit jobs.
Well, who gets to decide what a bullshit job is? I mean, if there's people out there willing to pay money in exchange for these services, I'm assuming there's some value to it.
Quote, in the year 1930, John Maynard Keynes predicted that by the century's end, technology would have advanced sufficiently that countries like Great Britain or the United States would have achieved a 15-hour work week. There's every reason to believe he was right. In technological terms, we are quite capable of this, and yet it didn't happen.
Well, the world that we live in now is way different from the world Keynes lived in the 1930s. Not only are there more people, but the needs of people have changed significantly as well. Do you think Keynes could have predicted, like smartphones and the internet, things like that?
Instead, technology has been marshaled, if anything, to figure out ways to make us all work more.
It's true that the expansion of technology resulted in more people working, but that has very little, if anything, to do with any sort of malicious conspiracy. It's because this new technology creates a need for people who have expertise with these certain fields. Again, do you think Keynes could have predicted that jobs such as computer programming and database administrators would exist?
In order to achieve this, jobs have had to be created that are effectively pointless. Huge swaths of people in Europe and North America in particular spend their entire working lives performing tasks they secretly believe do not really need to be performed.
So before you were arguing that capitalism is based on greed, now you're arguing that companies are willing to hire people specifically just so that they have jobs. If capitalism is all about people maximizing their own self-benefit, you'd think they'd weed out these pointless jobs. I mean, can you make up your mind there, Thought Slime?
The moral and spiritual damage that comes from this situation is profound. It is a scar across our collective soul. End quote. There's a whole lot of human energy that could be redirected to more useful purposes. And that's not even touching people who want to work and be productive, but can't find a job.
Which there'd be way less of if it weren't for regulations making it harder to hire people.
Or the idle rich, who literally do nothing. But granted, there are a lot of jobs that are difficult and require specialized training. Here's the thing though, I really don't want those jobs being done by people who are just cashing a check.
How many people do you think would go for these more difficult jobs if they knew they were going to be paid the same as everyone else? I mean, why bother going through any special education or training? Why bother putting in all that hard work if you're going to be compensated the same as everyone else? Do you really think passion and interest alone is enough to fulfill the need for all the professionals out there?
I want my doctor to genuinely care about my health and be passionate about learning and practicing medicine.
I don't know. If I'm suffering from illness or need of life-saving medical procedures, chances are I could probably give a rat's ass what the doctor's motivations are. I'm mostly concerned with whether or not the doctor can give me what I need, whatever their motivation happens to be.
There are probably a lot of very caring, intelligent, and fastidious people who can't become doctors under capitalism because they can't afford the training.
The reason medical training tends to be so expensive is because the government mandates certain forms of it through their licensing laws, essentially creating a monopoly on this service. Again, something largely the responsibility of government, not capitalism.
And imagine Just imagine the way specialized fields could be revolutionized if everyone with the necessary drive and talent was able to participate in those fields.
Again, your beef is with government, not capitalism. Government creates licensing laws that act as an artificial barrier to anyone wanting to enter a field. Under capitalism, all you need to succeed in any given industry is knowledge, skills, and hard work.
And those without those qualities didn't feel compelled to participate in them and junk everything up just to get a paycheck. Every doctor that's ever pushed pills on you because they had a sweetheart deal with the manufacturer, every therapist who's ever stalled to bill more hours, every lawyer who defends Exxon Valdez when they have an oil spill, every cab driver who took the long way to your destination, every salesperson who tried to push a useless extended warranty,
every commie that promised to save you from the evils of capitalism before you ended up waiting in a bread line.
They all did it because the point of their job is to make money, not to help people, not to service human need.
Well, whoever said those two goals are mutually exclusive? Under capitalism, the only way to make money is to satisfy human need. Now, it is true from the examples that Thought Slime gave that sometimes professionals can and do participate in some unsavory practices, but the reason they get away with this mostly has to do with government regulations, not the capitalism. Regulations make it harder to compete, therefore make it harder to push these unsavory practices out of the market.
But what about crappy jobs? Well, I guarantee for literally every job, no matter how difficult, dangerous, or disgusting, there are passionate people who genuinely want to do it.
Oh yeah, there's so many people chomping at the bit to scrub toilets, clean out septic tanks, or defuse bombs, just out of pure passion.
And plenty of competent people who would be willing to do it if it needed to get done.
Okay, quick show of hands. How many people out there would be willing to do something disgusting or dangerous for a living for no extra pay out of pure compassion? Are they out there? I'm sure they are. The question is there enough to satisfy demand, which I highly doubt.
And sure, maybe you say, not me, I'll just sit around playing video games. You cannot do the labor necessary to have everything you need to live a life of leisure playing video games on your own. You can't. Making your own food alone would be so much effort that you wouldn't have much time left over to research how to solar power your Xbox. At some point, you're going to require someone else's help, and why would people give it to you if you're not willing to help others when they need it?
Furthermore, why would people give it to you without any sort of way to verify whether or not you have in fact provided help to people when they needed it? Should they take his word, or should they somehow verify that he has in fact provided labor, that he's not just freeloading off of people? Gee, it's almost like that's what currency is.
But if everyone works just a little bit, we can all blow the rest of the time doing anything we want to do. You could spend a lot of time playing video games.
The leisure to work time ratio tends to be higher in countries that are more economically free.
Or you could stay the course in capitalism, generating endless reports that nobody reads to justify the salary that you need to pay rent to your landlord, who literally does nothing but sit on their butt and collect checks from you.
The landlord is also responsible for maintaining the premises, making it habitable, which is more work than you realize.
Your choice, I guess. Ultimately, I can't prove what human nature is. I can't prove people are fundamentally good or hardworking.
Which is why you advocate for a system that assumes that they are.
But even if we weren't, I think it's worth challenging the assumption that the way people behave now is intractable and unchangeable.
And that's all fine and dandy, but the problem is you want to push your bullshit in all of society. If you're uncertain whether or not a concept will pan out, why does it make any sense to just force it on everybody from the onset? Wouldn't it be a better idea to try it small scale, to see how it works, and if it works, everyone else will pick up on it?
I don't believe there's such thing as human nature. We're flexible animals. Human beings are really good at adapting to new ways of doing things.
And no system enables adapting to change better than capitalism. I agree, new ideas should be tried, but this type of system, the type of environment that fosters that is capitalism. Here's the thing, Thought Slime. In a capitalist society, there'd be absolutely nothing stopping you from getting a piece of land and starting your own commune on it. If this communal society you have in mind is so wonderful, go ahead and start one. I won't stop you. The only thing you can't do is force people to participate who don't want to.
We need to get better at the reverse, adapting the way we do things to be better for human beings.
Yeah, if only there was this supply and demand curve thing where we could determine what would be the optimal distribution of resources to maximize the happiness of a given society. Oh wait, that's capitalism, never mind.
We're good enough to live in a better world. We need to fix the mess that capitalism has made of our lives.
Yeah, we need to fix this mess capitalism has made of our lives. The technological breakthroughs and the infrastructure and the modern medicine and the capitalism. Yeah, have fun in the Paleolithic era, my friend.
We can fix it, and we will fix it, because humans have the capacity to be compassionate and hardworking. And compassion and hard work are all that is required.
Compassion and hard work definitely help, but it would be a stretch to say that's all you need to be successful. You can have all the compassion and hard work in the world. If you don't have the talent, knowledge, skills, and resources, well, it's not going to do you any good.
If you think humanity is defined by selfishness and cruelty, let me ask you this. If people are so fundamentally crooked that they cannot be trusted with freedom because they will abuse it, how can they be trusted with authority over someone else?
Yeah, I agree with that. How would you trust them with the authority to determine what would be considered a means of production and on those grounds just seize other people's property? Oh wait, that's what you're advocating for, never mind. You know what's funny? I think Thought Slime here is actually a closet capitalist. Well, think about it. He's against monopolization. He thinks professionals should be held responsible for their malpractice. He doesn't believe humans are inherently greedy. He encourages innovation and creativity. Thought Slime, my boy, my friend. Your royal cuckness, however you prefer to be addressed. Come on over to capitalism. We're glad to have you. This has been Philosophossum, making stupidity play dead. Have a good one.